I was telling the other American friends who were here to guess the pronunciation of the name before we get to the station, and we are never even close to correct. They say, yo, you have to take the last 20% of letters and just delete them and don't even say, and we still never ever get it right. So tonight I'm here to speak. I think Vincent asked me to say something about DAAS. So in the next 45 minutes, I guess let's talk about DAAS. Is anyone using DAAS today? Okay, maybe two people that raise their hands like this. It's the same worldwide. I mean, I speak all over, even Asia, throughout Europe, throughout the US. It's the same everywhere. Whereas, we wrote on brianmadden.com last year that 2014 would be the year of DAAS. And we believe this is true because how many of you are thinking about DAAS not because you think it's a good idea, but because your boss came to you and said, hey, this DAAS thing is something we should be looking at, right? So how many of you are looking at DAAS even to make your boss happy when you maybe go back to them and say, I don't know. Of course, we're all thinking, well, if we have DAAS, my business card says VDI administrator. So, what does that mean for, oh, DAAS, bad idea, boo. So Gabe and I wrote a book earlier this year called Desktops as a Service. This presentation I'm giving tonight is the short version of this book. You can buy this for more information. So, here's the thing. DAAS is here to stay. Whether you use DAAS or not, it will always be a thing, and it is always something that we will be talking about. So I think the way to start this conversation tonight is to sort of look at what is DAAS. And the way I talk about that is I say, there's this thing we call co-located VDI, right? When you buy a bunch of server virtual machines from your cloud provider and you run some Windows desktops in them and connect remotely. That is not DAAS. That is VDI. It's just running on someone else's servers instead of your own servers. I could say the same thing about RDSH. If you just rent some servers from Amazon, install your own Windows, install RDSH, that is RDSH in the cloud. That is not DAAS. What DAAS is where you are paying for the actual Windows desktop. You're paying for Windows, you're not managing the servers, you're not managing the instances, you're not running scripts to set up new servers and provision. You just send an email and say, I have one new user, and then you get an email back that has their login. That is DAAS. So DAAS is about Windows desktops in the data center, someone else's data center in the cloud that you're paying for as a service, and you don't care about all the back end. Frankly, they might have a stack of old Dell desktops, stacks and stacks and stacks, with log me in, or go to my PC, but who gives a shit? If they can offer it to you for 35 euros a month, what do you care? So it doesn't matter what they do, which is sort of the beauty of DAAS. DAAS can be RDSH or VDI. The actual technologies, single user, DAAS can be a client OS, Windows 7, Windows 8, or a server OS, 2012 R2. Again, you don't care. The thing about DAAS is just VDI that you pay for as a service. Now, I know one slide ago I mentioned, well, it's VDI or RDSH or stacks of boxes. This is all true. I'm going to use the word VDI. When I talk about DAAS, I say it's VDI as a service, but it could be RDSH. It could be any of these things. So every time I say VDI now, in the next hour or 40 minutes, I'm talking about all of these things. So DAAS is just VDI that you pay for as a service. So DAAS has all the good of VDI, but DAAS also has all the bad of VDI. We'll look more at that in a bit. But the important thing is DAAS, it is just a purchasing model for VDI. It's how you buy VDI. DAAS is not a technology. There is no technology that is DAAS. Now, companies like VMware, they bought Desktone, they have DAAS platforms, Citrix is making DAAS platforms. From a back-end infrastructure provider, if you want to make your own DAAS and sell DAAS to other people, okay, for you, DAAS is technology, you have to understand that. But if you're a customer, DAAS is not a technology. Amazon Web Services, if you're a customer, what DAAS platform do they run? The answer is, who gives a shit? I mean, really, who cares? It's not a technology. So now everyone wants to know, the very important question is, should you use DAAS? That's actually the wrong question to ask. It's not about the technology. So the real question is, how do you want to pay for your VDI? You know, you decide, do I want to use VDI, again, or RDSH, or single, whatever. But the question is, how do you want to pay for it? Not, do you want to use it? How do you want to pay for it? DAAS is a business arrangement. So again, should you use DAAS? Because all these people are saying, oh, VDI, man, they ask me questions. Do we use VDI or do we use DAAS? Should I use RDSH or VDI, RDSH or DAAS? Again, this is not the question. The question is this. Does it make sense for you to take your desktops off of your users' desks and put them into a data center? It can be your data center, cloud data center, any data center. But that's the question. Do you take a desktop off the desk and put it into the data center? If yes, and only if yes, then you look at the decision, okay, do we put this in our own on-premises data center, or do we put it in some remote hosted DAAS data center? But you cannot look at desktop computing versus DAAS. That's too big of a jump, too many steps. You look at desktop computing versus data center computing, then you look at the business model of data center computing and decide if you build it and own it and manage it yourself, or if you pay someone else to do it. So, as I said, DAAS is not a technology. Of course, there's lots of people who want to talk about DAAS technologies and all these kinds of things. You know, I've drawn these colored boxes here at these events in the past and talk about how desktop virtualization, it's about RDSH and VDI and app virtualization and user virtualization. We could put the DAAS technologies into that same model as some of the technologies that make desktop virtualization work. You know, remember the stacks we had in the past? And we could add in new stacks here. Oh, well, there's different DAAS platforms and DAAS provider offerings and all these different DAAS components that work. But you know, the beauty of DAAS, again, is you don't give a shit. They do whatever the hell they gotta do to make it work. All you care about is what's on top of the stack, which is all of your Windows desktops. As I said, DAAS it's just VDI you're paying someone else for. Which means all of the existing truths of VDI still apply to DAAS. So for example, if you decide to use DAAS, you still have to manage your desktops. Just like VDI, right? This is what I talked about here last year and 2 years and 3 years ago, where VDI does not automatically make all your desktops easier to manage. VDI is just a delivery option for desktops, but you still have to manage users and applications and security and patching and all this kind of stuff. So of course, this all still applies to DAAS. DAAS is just a desktop you're paying for, but you still have to manage it. You still have to figure out how to secure it. You still have to figure out all your applications. You still have to work out the user experience. These are all things that you still have to do, even if you are buying your VDI from someone else. Of course, VDI, again, RDSH, all these, you know, there's many benefits of VDI. You know, we have instant access to our desktops from anywhere. We can flow our sessions between devices. I mean, you start on the office, then your iPad, then your home, it's the same session. We can do things like, you know, using Windows applications from non-Windows computers and non-Windows devices. We can have fat applications over slow connections. This is nothing new. 15 years we've been talking about this. So again, this is still all true with DAAS. Now people say, well, wait a minute. I thought all the DAAS providers do all this hard work. I just said you don't have to give a shit about all these additional technologies, which is true, but how do you reconcile that with all of these other things you still have to deal with? And this is the key, is when you are buying DAAS, you are buying a desktop. DAAS is just a desktop. Now here's the thing. I can make this statement very forcefully and say DAAS is just a desktop. Is that good? It depends. Because there are a lot of people who have struggled with VDI and VDI infrastructure and servers and scaling and storage and all performance kind of stuff. And you know, if VDI is a challenge for you because you cannot make your VDI work, I'm going to think DAAS is probably a good idea. Now, if your VDI environment failed, not because of VDI, but because perhaps you tried non-persistent images or gold images or some other Windows problem, well, DAAS is not going to fix that. So I say DAAS is just a desktop. This is not a bad thing. Maybe it's good, maybe it's bad. It depends on the customer. Now, there's more here. Because, I'm saying DAAS is just a desktop, right? That's all it is. Now some people say, well, wait a minute. There are some DAAS providers who offer management too. Maybe instead of 30 euros per month for just a desktop, you can pay 100 euros per month, and they're going to manage that desktop. So isn't that actually good because now they are managing my desktop? Here's the secret about that. You don't need DAAS to get desktop management. You can pay desktop management providers today to manage your desktop, and they'll come in even if you have physical desktops. So the question of whether you want to pay someone else to manage your desktops, that is a very good question to ask, and something that everyone should consider. But that is a different question than whether you should use DAAS or not use DAAS. It's a different question as to whether you should use VDI or not use VDI. You can build your own VDI and still pay someone else to manage it for you. You can say, I hate virtualization, but I still want to pay someone else to manage it for me. So don't be fooled into thinking you have to get DAAS in order to have someone else manage your desktop, because that's certainly not necessary. Now, one of the things, though, that is probably true, as I was mentioning, is if you fail with VDI, this means we'll succeed with DAAS. Because again, the provider's doing all the hard work. Thank you. Yeah, the answer, before I'll say no, I'll say again, it depends. Like Sean, I'm a consultant for 20 years, so we are paid by the word. Sean makes a lot of money. And it depends. Again, why did you fail with VDI? If you failed with VDI because of your image management, for example, you're still going to fail with DAAS. If you failed with VDI because of the infrastructure and you couldn't build the VDI and get the VDI working and it didn't work right, well, then in your case, maybe DAAS would be okay. It's interesting because, with DAAS, they are doing all this for you, building and figuring out the infrastructure and all that kind of stuff. Again, though, you still have to manage it, you still have to secure it, you still have to deal with apps and users and your boss and all that kind of thing. Now, there's an interesting thing about DAAS. If you start to look at the future of Windows and the future of desktops, it's interesting because I feel like DAAS does fit into the overall evolution of IT. All of us today in all of our organizations have some kind of cloud-based, outsourced applications. It could be just web apps here and there. But the general flow, and this is kind of what Bernard was talking about, we started with everything was on-premises and physical, then we started virtualizing, we started buying things as a service. If you look at that general trend over the years, you can see how DAAS fits nicely into that. So I'm not even saying that even if you say no with DAAS, today, it does fit with the broad direction and broad trends of IT. And that's a big reason why I say that DAAS is here to stay, especially if you start looking at the flexibility you get with desktop virtualization, the flexibility of logging in from anywhere, and these other benefits of VDI. But then with DAAS, you get that flexibility, but you don't really have to figure it out. You don't have to learn all the intricacies of VDI. So I believe that DAAS does fit in with the long-term sort of roadmap of Windows desktop computing. Okay, so saying that, let's look at some of the benefits of DAAS. And it's funny because I guess I should start to say, here's the bullshit that the DAAS providers say is benefits. Okay, cheaper than what? We'll look at the cost models in a little bit. I don't think that DAAS is necessary. It depends. Again, it depends. But I don't expect it would be cheaper. It should cost more because they're running my VDI and designing and doing it for me. So that should cost more than me doing it myself. But again, that's okay because I'm paying for more service and I'm paying for the stuff and they're doing work for me. So I don't know that I believe that DAAS is cheaper than building VDI on your own, but again, that's okay with me. I'm paying for someone else to know what the hell they're doing instead of me figuring out VDI on my own. They say DAAS is easier to manage. Again, well, the VDI part is easier because I don't have to do it. But was that my challenge in the past? I still have to manage desktops. Some vendors say DAAS is fully managed. These are all real, by the way. When we wrote the DAAS book earlier this year, we interviewed DAAS customers, consultants, vendors, providers, everyone, and looked through all the marketing literature of all of them. And this is from Amazon Web Services. It says, AWS Workspaces, they call it, is fully managed. And again, it's a fully managed what exactly? Yes, I think in their case, it's because they have Windows. This is true. I'm not making this up. I think with Amazon, it's because they have Windows Update turned on by default. So, and I'm like, oh my gosh, all these years, we're fucking around with SCCM and all these users and all this kind of stuff. All we had to do was just turn on Windows Update. Don't tell your boss, you won't have a job. So, they say, oh, DAAS is secure, because it runs in the data center, and you all know VDI is more secure than regular. Sense the tone. I do not think VDI is more secure. That's a topic for a different day. Sean wrote a 5-part series on brianmadden.com about why VDI is not more secure. Funny, all the things you have to do to make VDI secure, you could also do to your existing desktops. And then they're equally secure. Another one from Amazon. They said DAAS provides an optimized user experience. Okay, compared to what? Right? Yeah, they use PC over IP. That's great. But what applications are you using? How fast is your connection? It's not a very optimized experience if your users are working from airplanes with no connection. So, it all depends. Okay, so this is all the claims that are bullshit. But I think that DAAS does have many real benefits, and these are the benefits now coming from me and coming from Gabe. One thing is, obviously, DAAS has no big upfront costs. So, if Amazon costs, I don't know what the price is here, if it's available here, 50 euros per user per month, your cost on month 1 is the same as month 2, as month 5, as month 10. You don't have to buy servers, you don't have to buy licenses, you don't have to get all this stuff. It's just from the beginning, the cost is the same. It's also more predictable costs. It's 50 euro per user per month. So 20 users, you know how much it costs. 50 users, you know how much it costs. 100 users, or 1 user, you know how much it costs. Whereas with VDI, the cost growth is kind of up and down, and you build up some environments, and then you have to go to shared storage. You have a big cost, but then that's flat for the next 100 users, then a bigger cost. Then you sell some hardware and it goes down, you buy some more hardware and it goes up. And you don't know where the jump is. Like your VDI environment's kind of full, but you think you can't put too many more users on. And then adding 1 more department with only 20 users might cost you 30,000 euro because you have to buy all new equipment to bump over the gap. So with DAAS, your costs are very predictable. What's also nice is, I mentioned you've got the incremental scalability, but that incremental scalability, you can have some very small increments. It's very fine-grained scalability. You can go from user 49 to 50 to 51 in very small blocks. Whereas again, maybe with VDI, you put 100 users per server. So 500 users is good. User number 501 now costs 10,000 euros. You have to buy a new server and new storage and get them provisioned. So the costs are predictable, they're very incremental, and it's small, per user increments. And of course, there's a very real advantage of with DAAS, you don't have to know about all the stuff that we talk about at Bryforum and all these engineering Citrix and VMware and Microsoft things. You don't have to know about servers or different types of flash memory and types of single instance block level storage, and I don't know. Like I said, what does Amazon use as their DAAS platform? I have no idea. It's $50 per month. That's what you know. It's the same thing. Like with all these, and that's any cloud provider. What's Gmail platform? What's Dropbox platform? I don't know. I just pay for it. What does iTunes use as their cloud platform? I don't know. I push the button, the music starts playing. That's how DAAS is. So it's a very real advantage. And there's some bonus sort of advantages that are not as major, but I love that with DAAS, it's so easier to test and to pilot. With Amazon, you go to the website and set it up, and they provision your first desktop within 20 minutes, and you are now using VDI. Whereas, if you build it yourself, maybe 6 months. And by the way, this doesn't even have to be if you want to use DAAS. Maybe you want to use VDI and you have reasons for wanting to build VDI yourself. That's okay. But you don't have to buy all this hardware and spend these months in engineering effort. If you're thinking maybe about using VDI, just buy a couple users from DAAS and put them on the DAAS and have them try it and see if it works. And then you can know within a week whether it works or not. And if it doesn't work, then you've only spent 20 minutes setting up an account, and that's it. And then, of course, you can go back to using VDI 6 months later, which probably you would never do, because you're like, DAAS works, it seems fine, that's okay. Also, the migration time moving to DAAS versus moving to VDI can be a lot faster for the same reasons. You don't have to have all the time to build the infrastructure and provision and figure things out. You can just go sort of right away. So those are what we feel are sort of the real advantages of DAAS. But there's some challenges, or some, I won't call these downsides or not benefits, but if you're going to go to DAAS, there are some challenges. The number one challenge, when we talk to all the customers and everything, is, man, you have to trust that service provider. You got to trust them for so many different reasons also, like, obviously, do they know what they're doing? Can they say what they're, do what they're going to say they're going to do? Are they going to go to business? Are they going to exit the DAAS business? Did you see this data that came out about 2 or 3 weeks ago on how much Amazon is losing, how much money Amazon is losing on Amazon Web Services? And that's causing, and if Amazon Web Services is losing money, that means that like Microsoft Azure and all these are losing money. How long can they be losing money before they're like, yeah, fuck this, we're getting out of this industry? And then you have 30 days to find a new provider. When, by the way, 45 billion other clients are trying to find the same new provider in 30 days. So you have to put a lot of trust into that provider. This actually comes from Sean. The story is like, when the stuff is in the cloud, it's nice. You don't see it. You don't know what's going on. When it's in the cloud, you don't know what's going on. Now, in the U.S., we have 2 problems. One, if the government decides they want to spy on you, at least they have to break in to your servers to do it without you knowing. If they have a court order and they march into your company to start looking at what they do, well, when you go to work the next day, you'll figure out that the government is there doing something. But if it's a DAAS provider, they go to the DAAS provider and say, hey, we request that you monitor this company, and also you're not allowed to tell them, so you might now be fully monitored and have no idea that it's happening. which wouldn't happen if it's on your own environment. The other story, the story from Sean was about basically, if you're a DAAS provider, you have lots of different customers. Well, what happens if one customer is doing something bad, and the government wants to come in and the police come in and take all the computers for evidence, right? And you say, okay, which ones are that customer's servers? You say, oh, we've got virtualized storage, it's all everything, it's all everywhere. And they're like, right, back the truck up and grab that refrigerator cabinet and off it goes. And you think the government gives a shit about, oh, sorry, all our clients are screwed here. So that's something you might have to worry about. So this is the fantastic technology that only takes one, illegal activity from one customer, and they're taking everything away. Of course, we have the issue that we have to figure out how your desktops are going to access the files. I put all my desktop in the cloud. Where do my files go? Are they living down in file shares in my office? Do I put those into the cloud too? But what now? What about my desktops who are not on DAAS? Do I have them access their files from the cloud? Do I set up replication? It's like pulling a thread on, oh, I should move this over, I should move this, I should move this. Now it gets sort of complex. So yeah, and then of course you also have the flat out aspect of, when we're in different countries and trying to access things far away and all that. Yeah, I heard share file, right? That's what Citrix said, just use share file. I don't know what the problem is. So, of course, we have the locality rules. You all are very much aware of this. You've got different governments and regulations and where your data needs to live and all that sort of stuff. And some of the DAAS providers, again, we don't care where it lives. That's the benefit. But for some of us, that's not possible not to care. We have to know where our data is. There's a big integration problem with DAAS, too, because at least if you're building your own VDI, it fits in perfectly with all those scripts that you've been writing for the past 20 years. They're still in kickstarts and you're not 100% sure how it works, but it still login still works, and you have to figure out how to hook into this weird billing system, and this app talks to your door security, and there's all of that kind of stuff that has been here working for 20 years and it still works, and it may be hard to integrate all that when we move it out into a DAAS provider. We've got the internet reliability issues, which interestingly are not just our internet reliability issues, but also the provider's internet reliability issues. So all the providers talk about how, oh, they've got multiple level 3 connections and all these fancy things that are made of glass and it's okay, it never goes down. But you yourselves have to maybe think about multiple providers and multiple connections. And it's one of the things like, this happened on brianmadden.com, one of the outages that we had back before everything was all cloud-based. We ran our own servers, our own web servers and everything, and we did everything perfect, quotes, like 2 separate like power supplies, power rails on the side of the rack, and 2 power supplies on all the server, 1 on each side. They told us it was on different circuits, but they went back to the same power distribution units, and when that thing failed, both our circuits went down. So you've got that sort of stuff to deal with. Another thing we say is, with DAAS, you might not have any clout in the cloud. So cloud is like, what's your reputation, what's your power? Like with Microsoft, you can negotiate. You might have gotten this really good deal on Microsoft licenses and you really were aggressive and got the good deal, or maybe you work for an educational institution and you get your Windows licenses super cheap. But when you go to Amazon, you can't be like, hey man, so I got a good deal with Microsoft, so can you, give me the good deal too? You know what they'll tell you? It's like, fuck off. Because they don't care. I mean, if you don't use them, they don't care. So that's the problem, is that your reputation, your power with your vendors does not apply in the world of DAAS. So we also have all the fun stuff, the fear of the cloud. The cloud is dangerous, because they don't know our systems as well as we know our systems. They don't really know what they're doing. They don't care as much. Like I just said with Amazon, like that's dangerous because Amazon doesn't care about us. If we continue to manufacture plumbing brackets, we are the only people who care about plumbing brackets, and we care more about plumbing brackets than anyone else out there. And I, as IT, care about delivering the Windows applications for the people who care about plumbing brackets like no one else can. And it's so good, and it feels good to me. I can see my servers, and I can hug them. And I can know that they are safe, and I can know that all is well. With my DAAS provider, I call my DAAS provider when my desktop is down, and the phone rings, and what are they doing? They're breaking the record for how long the pencil can be held, because they don't care about plumbing fixtures and plumbing brackets like the way that I do. So this is a big fear. Of course, this fear is total bullshit. There's this, human characteristic that we all think that we are better. We all overrate our own abilities to do anything. How many men here are the best lover your lady has ever been with? Man, you don't have to raise your hands. But they did a survey in the US, something like 80% of drivers rate themselves above average. Think about that. So we have the same thing in the world of IT. Again, this is crap, because this happens in my company. I work for a company called Tech Targets. You know what we do for email? We run our own Exchange servers. Our email's down all the time, but I sent an email to our director of IT. It's actually, our IT department is called MIS, which shows you how old school it is, and said, we should be using Gmail. We are in the business of writing technology articles. We should not be in the business of email hosting. We are not good at it. But they said, yeah, the SLAs and Google, and they don't really care, and email is very important to us. Like, we're that one company who email is very important to. And Google, who knows, mail is just a hobby for them, and their real business is advertisements and all this kind of stuff. But the thing is, the people who use Google, there's like 1 billion users of Gmail. Google is a publicly traded company. The people who created Gmail, they invented the internet. The guy who invented mail works at Google. These are the people who are responsible for Gmail. When Gmail is down, it's in the news. They've got the PhDs of the internet making sure that their mail is up and running. We have Ray. Now, in all due respect, Ray is certified. But when you think about it, how arrogant are we that we think we can do mail better and faster and more securely than Google? What planet do we live on? And I'll say the same thing here about VDI. None of you in this room can host VDI as well as VMware can. None of you can build VDI that's more reliable than Amazon. You can't. Now again, there's a lot that goes into this decision. You might have, as I mentioned, these special requirements, locality, there's lots of reasons. But the idea that, the cloud is dangerous and I don't trust the provider, that's asinine. That just does not apply in this world. Another problem we have with these providers is they're not necessarily as flexible as we like. Amazon has 2 DAAS offerings. We call them the big desktop and the small desktop. One of them is one sort of virtual CPU unit with 2 gigs of RAM. The other one is 2 virtual CPU units with 4 gigs of RAM. Those are your options. What if I want 4 CPU units? That's not a thing. That doesn't exist. What if you want a GPU? Not there. What if you want to use a different build of Windows? Not happening. So, we've come to like the fact that we can do whatever we want in our own environments. And when we go to these DAAS providers, it's very much like, it's like you walk into McDonald's and say, I don't want a pickle on my Big Mac. And they say, what are we, Burger King? Come on. So you don't buy there. So, and I also mentioned, another problem is, these providers might not be doing as much as we think. When we look at what we think we're buying, and what they actually provide. But let's be very careful, because they are fully managed, again, because they turn on Windows updates. But our boss says, oh, great, we can throw away all this management stuff we've been doing for all these years. You know, they might not be doing as much as we can around bandwidth and optimization and that kind of stuff. I mentioned, you know, there's a typical sort of fear or just lack of control that I get with cloud providers that just don't know what they're doing. Again, we put our lives in professionals' hands every day. This guy doesn't want to crash the plane as much as we don't want him to crash the plane. The DAAS provider doesn't want the desktops to go down as much as we don't want them to go down. But you can't hug a server, you can't hug a cloud. And that's tough for people. Now, if the DAAS environment does start to go down, we talk about the clouds. They probably have more cloud than we have. If Amazon goes down and it's a Windows problem, they're calling Bill Gates on the phone. And he's saying, well, actually I don't do that. And they say, hey, Bill Gates, you get down here, you fix this. And it's happening. When ours goes down, we go through the support. We pay for the good support. So let's get past the is it plugged in phase. But they still walk through their scripts, and we have to work through that. So, that said, where do we see DAAS being used today? Do you get this from a few years ago? I talked about, you know, in the VDI delusion book, you know, when all you have is a hammer, everything looks like a nail. Well, okay, sometimes we do have nails, and so the DAAS hammer does make sense for that. There's a bunch of easy things. You know, temp workers, contractors, people like this, they're in for a week, a month, they're new hires, you need them up and fast. You know, we need more users temporarily. Also maybe for disaster recovery, where we have everything set up and running and ready to go, just kind of sleeping. And then if something happens and we need to put a bunch of users there, or even if it's not for our own disaster recovery, like let's say we're the Red Cross and our servers work fine, but then there's a disaster and we need 100 new workers immediately, we can give them these desktops and up they go. I mentioned, you know, when you're tired of that cycle, like the constant, you know, repair and new hardware and this, and I need, this is more expensive and now that, to just making everything consistent. You know, that's a good use case for DAAS. I like it for companies that have not, you know, not the most technical staff, where like you don't want these guys running VDI. There's no one there that should be doing that. No one. This guy is the most technical because he has the thing they use to unplug shit from the drain. And he's the IT guy too. He also signs the checks. But when you go to DAAS, I mean, you've got this guy. He's got a radio. You know, they know what they're doing. And so if you're a smaller company with not a big IT staff, DAAS works well for that. Hey, and DAAS is nice because we have a service level agreement. Right? What's your service level agreement for your desktops today? Again, instead of Ray, it's you. And, you know, you have the pager. And that's about it. Now, of course, service level agreements can be tricky. You have to read what you're actually getting. You know, here's Amazon. This is real examples again. Amazon, their service level agreements is they will reimburse you for any downtime via credits on your next invoice for next month's service. Let's say it costs €50 per month. So let's see. If I'm down for a few hours, I've got 24 hours in a day. I've got 31 days in the month. So that works out to, if I'm down 4 hours, that's, you know, about 1/2 of 1%. So 4 hours. I was down for 4 hours. All my desktops. And Amazon's going to do some math and say, okay, well, deduct 26 cents from next month, which we will, again, not give you back in cash. We'll add that to your discount to the next month's bill. And that's their SLA. So we also have the challenge of licensing in DAAS environments. You know, Microsoft, the service provider license, when you just go and pay for your license at this multi-service, that's only for Windows Server. So you can only connect to Windows Server desktops with DAAS, not to Windows Client desktops. If you do want to use Windows 7 or Windows 8, you know, bring your own licenses and have Windows 7, there's a minimum number of users you have to have because it's not worth them to set up all that environment. So small environments are always Windows Server. And in fact, not all DAAS providers even offer Windows clients. So Amazon Web Services, it's Windows Server only. Now the reason I mention this is because there's a lot of discussion about if it's okay to use Windows Server as your DAAS desktop. Now let's be very clear. We're not necessarily talking about RDSH, right? I'm not necessarily saying that this means you have sessions per user and multiple user sessions on one VM. We're talking about single user Windows Server. So not RDSH, it's 1 to 1 to 1 to 1, but if you look at properties, it shows it's a server OS instead of a client OS. And a lot of people say this is bad. I think most of these people who are in the business of also hosting clients and say, oh, you don't want servers, servers are weird. But I ask, is it okay to use a Windows Server as a desktop? Of course. Like, haven't we been doing this since 1997? And it's fine. And again, we're not talking about sessions and all this compatibility and all this kind of stuff. The biggest thing is you don't have the same image across the board. So your DAAS users need to have a different image than your actual workstation users. And of course, that means different patch cycles and different SCCM and all that kind of stuff. So, but when the reaction of people say, no, I do not want to use Windows Server for my client OS. You know, there was this company called, what were they? Who's that? The gaming provider that got in the desktop business. OnLive. A company called OnLive, who was offering, it turns out to be very illegal, but they were offering desktop hosting. It took the internet 2 days to figure out they were using Windows Server and not clients. And if the whole internet can't figure it out for 2 days, then you can't figure it out. Your users won't figure it out. It's not going to matter. So the final sort of bits, when we look at the costs of DAAS, remember, DAAS is about renting our desktops. VDI is about buying our desktops. But renting is not a bad thing. Yes, renting means I pay for it forever. But again, at least it's the same every month. And forgetting VDI, even the regular desktop costs, like new Windows licenses, new desktop refresh cycles, I'm the same way with music. So, in the US, you can buy your music online, track by track, album by album, or pay $10 for unlimited music. And people say, as soon as you stop paying that, it goes away. This is true. But now I know it's $10 a month, no matter how much music I listen to, no matter what, no matter where I take it. And that's okay. So at the end of the day, yes, DAAS has lots of costs. You have the management costs of you still having to manage your desktops. You have the additional server costs that you might need to pay. Your DAAS provider has to host your domain controllers for your user accounts and your file servers and all that kind of stuff. You have all the costs of things that are left behind in your environment because not all the servers are going to go there, so you still have to manage those servers. There's little hidden costs. There's no overcommit with DAAS. Your per user or per concurrent user licenses you might get with Citrix today because you've got not all the users logging in at the same time. Yes, there's money being saved by DAAS providers due to overcommit. It's their money, not your money, that's being saved. So there's you pay for every user per month, whether or not they're logging in or not. Obviously you've got the costs, migrating and everything. And remember, by the way, when you're doing this cost analysis, you can make these numbers show whatever you want. I talked in the years past about how to lie with cost models, and that article's still kicking around, so you can Google that. So the sort of final thing I'll say about DAAS is it's not all or nothing. Bernard talks about platform as a service. We talk about a lot of infrastructure as a service. Do you need to buy DAAS where the provider is just selling you a desktop? Maybe you build your own VDI at a co-location facility. Your servers, their building. That's an option. Maybe you build your own VDI on platform as a service or infrastructure as a service. Maybe you go to Amazon Web Services, use Amazon EC2, and just still use Horizon View or Zen Desktop, but you build it all yourself with your own licenses. So it's their hardware, their internet, their reliability, but you still own that environment. So these are all options that you have with DAAS. So anyway, that is the entire book in 45 minutes. And I guess if you have follow-up questions or anything, we'll speak about them over drinks later.